What do you make of the hiring of Brad Larson for the Blue Jackets to become the 8th head coach in history?
Yeah, well, it's a comfortable choice for them. I think if you listen to Jarmo Kekalainen on Friday at their press conference, you'll hear him say repeatedly that this is a name when they started that they felt they were going to come back to him. I think they always felt that he was a strong candidate for this. And there are folks in the fan base. All you got to do is look at social media. There's frustration with this choice for sure. And I think all of that is based on the Blue Jackets' power play success or lack of success the last few years. The Blue Jackets don't see Brad Larson through the prism of a power play coach. They see a much larger picture there. They see what he did in the minor leagues with their AHL affiliate for 2 years, where he won, I want to say, at a winning percentage over 60%. Very successful, won 2 division titles there. And they brought him up to the NHL. He's been here 7 years. They know him well. I think they feel like he's the right coach for this time. A teacher, it could be some tough couple of years here with Columbus. He's a young guy. He's a guy who's played in the league, and they feel like he's a teacher. So this is the guy they came back to, the first coach hire in the NHL this offseason, head coach offseason, because they knew they had, at least they believe they had the right guy.
Do you find it at all strange that they kept it in-house with hiring Brad Larson and they didn't give a shot, as far as we know, to Brad Shaw?
Well, that much was surprising to me, yes, because for me, Brad Shaw was an assistant coach that at minimum deserved an interview. I mean, he's one of the most highly respected coaches in this league in terms of his intellect, his acumen, all of these things. It's not a surprise that he was snapped up pretty quickly. Vancouver hired him as an assistant coach earlier this week, but it surprised me that he didn't earn so much as an interview in Columbus. You know what? Oftentimes, that's a show of respect for a lot of people. Sometimes people look at them cynically and think they're being handed out just as a kind gesture. I don't think that would have been the case in Brad Shaw's situation, because he's a coach that many wonder why he's not an NHL head coach. But I think the Blue Jackets approached it. They know Brad Shaw very well. He'd been in Columbus for 5 years. They didn't see him as a realistic choice for their head coach, and so best for him to move on.
You heard a lot of names associated with being interviewed for the head coaching job for the Blue Jackets. Yeah. Gerard Gallant, former Blue Jackets coach, was up for it again. Rick Tocchet, formerly of the Arizona Coyotes. What stands out about Brad Larson that maybe the Blue Jackets like so much that you didn't get from the other guys?
Yeah, well, one of the things that Jarmo Kekalainen keeps coming back to, and I think this is interesting and would be interesting to a lot of people. He never had a problem with John Tortorella's approach. He never had a problem with the standard that John Tortorella set and his demand that players matched that. He didn't always agree with the process that it took. Didn't always agree with the fact that it was made so public. There's a lot of stuff when you have John Tortorella as your coach. There are some interesting dynamics there that you won't face with too many other coaches in this league. But I think he sees a lot of the good side of Tortorella in Brad Larson. Now, we're not going to, I hate to break it to you, my media brethren, we're not going to get these great explosive press conferences. That's not going to happen. Very unlikely. You're not going to get great footage of player coach spat on the bench. Very unlikely. Although Patrick Laine and Larson did have a thing earlier this last season. It's going to be different, but yet it's in many ways, I think Jarmo Kekalainen believes that it's going to be similar, and that Brad Larson, and I saw this from Brad Larson when I would go to Springfield and watch him coach at the AHL level. He is a former player, and so players will take criticism. They'll take a firm, no-nonsense coach, a former player who understands what it's like, the long seasons, the up and the down. But he's not a guy that puts up with a lot of BS. And, here are the rules, here are the standards. There's a little bit of leeway, but it's not too long before the decision's made pretty quickly. He's firm, he's fair. And I think Jarmo Kekalainen sees a coach that will hold players to a standard similar to John Tortorella, maybe without some of the extracurriculars around all of that. So I think that's the attraction.
You talked about it could be a tough couple of years here in
Yeah.
Columbus when it comes to the Blue Jackets and the roster, and more probably a rebuild instead of a reload. Do you think that Brad Larson is going to be a good fit? You mentioned him being a teacher. Do you see him being somebody that gets them through a rebuild until they can contend once again for the playoffs?
Yeah. Well, this is such a tough thing, I think, for the Blue Jackets to articulate. And I don't think we fully know what their plans are for the next few seasons. Sometimes we're so black and white with this. Are they going to bring it down to the wood and really rebuild it the right way? Which, by the way, there's been lots of struggles in Columbus, but they've never really done that. They've had results that look like a team that's rebuilding, but they've never actually done it the way the Pittsburghs, the Washingtons, the Colorados, three of the powerhouses in this league, that the way they've done it. So is that what lies ahead? Now, listen, the Blue Jackets are not going to sell Brad Larson on this job by saying, we're not going to be very good for 3 years. We'd like you to be the coach. There's no way that's the pitch. From Brad Larson's perspective, I think if you look at it almost cynically from his perspective, if he turns down this job, he's thrusting himself out into the coaching merry-go-round to likely become an assistant somewhere else, right? So for Brad Larson, this is a dream come true. This is a guy that's been coaching. He's been in the organization for 11 years. He's made his way to the top of the coaching profession in this organization. And so I think he's a hell of a hockey coach. I think we'll see where it goes. I think a lot of people who assume that this is a rough hire or that this is going to be this, I think there are a lot of examples in pro sports everywhere. What did Browns fans think of Kevin Stefanski 2 years ago? And now they absolutely love the guy. What did Colorado Avalanche fans think of Jared Bednar a few years ago when they hired him? Just because someone is here at this point, I don't think we have a full understanding of what Brad Larson can be as a coach. Having said that, I do think that this organization is going to take some lumps, and they need a teacher. They need someone who can bring the young players up and teach them the right way to play hockey, because it's going to be turned over to young players, and there may be some short-term suffering in the hope that there's long-term gain.
It wouldn't be this Blue Jackets offseason if we didn't bring up Seth Jones.
Yep.
Do you think the hiring of Brad Larson could maybe not entice, but maybe put something in the back of Seth Jones's mind to possibly stay with the Blue Jackets and sign a long-term deal?
I don't get that. I don't get that sense. I don't think Seth Jones's decision to want to become a free agent in 2022 is rooted in who the Blue Jackets coach is. He never had a problem with John Tortorella, at least that I understand. I don't think he did. So yeah, I think Seth Jones is looking to become a free agent. I don't think this move was made to change his mind. I don't get the sense that it will change his mind. I think it's a bigger issue than that. Yeah, I think we can look at this as a signal of a rebuild, maybe. But if you're Brad Larson, I promise you, Brad Larson's not thinking that way. And as we've seen before from the guys in this room, the players in this franchise have not been down for rebuilds either. They've screwed up a couple by winning. They're not going to accept just losing and rebuilding. So, and I think honestly, that is what has Seth Jones looking elsewhere. He's coming into his prime. It's easy to say that you're going to rebuild, and in 2 or 3 years you're right back up on top. But we look at Detroit, we look at Buffalo. It's not always an easy or short trip. So, do you want to spend your prime with a franchise that's in that process? And I don't think Seth Jones does. I think that's the signal he's sending. So I don't expect that to change with this.
2 popular assistant coaches under John Tortorella recently, Manny Legacy, Jared Bull. Do you see them possibly being assistant coaches under Brad?
So my understanding is that Jared Bull will be back in some capacity. Kenny McCudden, skills coach, assistant coach, will be back in some capacity as well. Manny Legacy still has another year in his contract. Goaltending coaches are, I don't want to say they're independent contractors, but they're sort of looked at in a different light as the coaching staff. If they were to hire someone from outside the organization who had a very strong opinion about who his goaltending coach should be, then I think maybe you'd look, maybe there's a possibility for a change there. I think Legacy's back. Been told Bowl and McCudden are both back. What will be interesting now is to see who Brad Larson hires as his two assistant coaches. One of them, of course, will likely run the power play.
One last thing I noticed in going out to Blue Jackets practices, it was a lot of Brad Larson and Brad Shaw running the practices, not so much John Tortorella. Do you foresee Larson running a lot of practices? Do we know much about his coaching style when it comes to that?
I suspect his first years as a coach, the first several years, he will be running almost every practice. I think there may be some morning skates optionals where he's not out there. What John Tortorella does, and I think we should pause for a minute to sort of talk about him, the other side of John Tortorella that a lot of people don't see. He would turn his practices over to Larson and Shaw as a way for them to gain valuable experience just in the event for this day. To now you know what it's like to run an NHL practice, Brad Larson. He did that a lot. One thing I loved is at the end of last season when John Tortorella knew he was going to be moving on, he brought Bowl, McCudden, he brought the video coach, Dan Singleton, others onto the bench for games so that they could all be together and they could all experience that, which they hadn't otherwise experienced. And there's some hilarious stories about that, just giving them that bench experience in a game as almost an emotional gift goodbye to them. Listen, Brad Larson is extremely close to John Tortorella. And if my assumption is if he didn't get this job, Larson, he likely would have next surfaced in the NHL wherever John Tortorella does as head coach. I think they're that close. So there is an enormous debt. And I don't think Brad Larson will have any reservations sharing that, how much he feels he owes to John Tortorella. I think that's going to come through pretty clearly in these next couple of days as he talks about his hire.